Welcome back to CyHawk Talk here on a Wednesday. Ben Hutchens joining me as we navigate the end of the football season and the beginning of men's and women's college basketball season. Wrestling season's upon us. Oh, the postseason of women's soccer is also arrived. Iowa playing Missouri State on Friday in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I'll be at that game, actually. So you guys can tune into QCTimes.com to check out all the latest on women's soccer. I'm going to have a feature story on a senior from a local town as well. So lots going on. Ben, how are you kind of handling this wild week in college athletics?
Yeah, they call it crossover season, normally just referring to football and basketball. But both teams we cover, Ethan, have strong women's basketball programs. Wrestling programs are huge. Football is always worth talking about. I think like Kyrie Irving is doing the crossover. It's that kind of level right now.
Yeah, it's been pretty intense, but we'll try and keep things pretty focused for you here on the show. We're going to be looking at the football programs for both teams, and it kind of a down 2 weeks for Iowa State. They drop out of the top 25 after back-to-back losses. Ben, what's the number one storyline this week as the Cyclones get ready for a matchup against Cincinnati?
Ethan, I think it has to be this Iowa State defense. That has been the most critical part of this two-game slide that's felt kind of like a three-game slide, right? They managed to get by UCF to get to 7-0, but you saw signs of a defense kind of deteriorating in the running game. Really the result of a lot of injuries. That's what Matt Campbell said when asked pretty much point blank, what's the problem right now with the defense? He didn't try and use it as an excuse, but he very made sure everybody knows how much of a challenge it's been overcoming a lot of defensive injuries. So that's what I'm watching on Saturday against Cincinnati is, can Iowa State stop the run? That's where Matt Campbell thinks everything starts. I asked him about a lack of pressure last week against Kansas, and he said, look, it has to do with stopping the run. You can't get pressure on a quarterback if you're in 2nd and 2, 2nd and 1. So I think stopping the run is the most important thing. And last three games, Iowa State's given up an average of 240 yards on the ground. It's been a problem. So that's, I think, the number one area I'm going to be watching is, can Iowa State stop the run? Cincinnati, the running back, Corey Kiner, doesn't necessarily scare you. He's not a bad player, averaging 5.2 yards a carry. But I don't care about the level of running back on the other team. I think right now it's all the focus on Iowa State's defense. Iowa State's defense is going to be the make or break reason, not the level of running back they're playing.
One thing I remember you mentioning on Sunday was self-inflicted wounds being a big problem. I think I remember going back to Sunday Rewinds ago that was a topic discussion following the Texas Tech loss. Seems like maybe not something that's necessarily focused on the defense, but maybe is a bit of a team-wide epidemic the last 2 weeks. What can you say towards what the Cyclones have done to hurt their chances of winning the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, when your defense has given up, a lot of points, a lot of yardage, the self-inflicted wounds on offense become even more glaring. In the last 2 weeks, it's been worse than it has all season. 2 weeks ago against Texas Tech, season high 8 penalties. Last week against Kansas, 6 penalties, 5 of which came in the first half, and it was on stuff like delay of games. It was on a stuff like a false start. In fact, the second Iowa State drive ended pretty much because of a back-to-back false start and delay of game. So just not good focus. Matt Campbell, the message we've heard is, attention to detail, precision, those kinds of words. But I don't know. We've heard the Cyclones talk about how much they're focusing on cleaning that up, but I just haven't seen it. So I think the self-inflicted wounds are definitely something to watch. It's penalties, but it's also stuff like turnovers. Cincinnati does really well at ripping the ball away. Another point of emphasis, Matt Campbell said he gave his guys on Tuesday. So communications in the secondary, again, a problem in Arrowhead. What wasn't a problem in Arrowhead, along with penalties and those kind of self-inflicted wounds might kind of be the hidden reason behind a win or a loss here.
Maybe one type of self-inflicted wound that's not necessarily or one that doesn't go unnoticed is interceptions. Rocco Becht may be in a bit of a slump in his second year as a full-time starter. Started the season really hot and maybe regressed a little bit since. What's gone into some of his struggles in taking care of the football of late?
Yeah, Ethan, he has 4 interceptions in his last 3 games, which is, I guess, more alarming considering he had only 3 interceptions through his first 6. So something in the last few weeks isn't quite right in terms of Rocco Becht's decision making, accuracy, luck. I mean, with tipped passes and all that kind of things. So Rocco's talked about it, especially eliminating the pick sixes. That's been a little bit of a problem the last couple weeks for Rocco. So they had that coming into the game. And then the interesting wrinkle, another matchup I'm going to be watching in the Cincinnati game, is the return of former Cyclone defensive coordinator Tyson Veidt. He was here for 8 years. He was at Toledo for 2 years with Matt Campbell before that. And now he returns to Jack Trice Stadium on the other sideline. So it'll be really cool. He used to coach linebackers here, got a promotion. Matt Campbell said he's really happy for him, to kind of live out that dream that every assistant coach wants to make. And the two families are really close. I'll have a story about it, Ethan, coming on Friday about the relationship between Veidt and Campbell. It's super tight knit. It started, when they were playing in the same conference back in the day, 2 Ohio boys who have a lot of respect for each other, a really good friendship. And I'm interested to see how it turns out on the football field because these two guys know each other really well. Veidt has brought the 3-3-5 defense the Cyclones have run to Cincinnati. So you'll see that on both sides of the field. And Rocco Becht talked about, we know each other pretty well. Is it in baseball where you give the advantage to the hitter who's seen the pitcher a bunch of times, or do you give the advantage to the pitcher who's seen the hitter a bunch of times? That remains to be seen. But I'm interested to watch the cat and mouse game between Iowa State quarterback Rocco Becht and former Iowa State defensive coordinator Tyson Veidt.
You got me sold. I'll be sure to read that story when you post it. So be sure to go to Ben's account on X. Ben, I don't have your handle memorized. I think it's at Ben_Hutchens_.
Yeah, I think there were 7 other Ben Hutchens who beat me to it. So I did have to settle for the at Ben_Hutchens_.
Well, be sure to read that story on Friday. I'm enticed. And when you talk about quarterbacks, reminds me that there's a bit of a quarterback situation going on in Iowa City. And I don't know if it's necessarily trending in the way people will want it to go. We got Tim Lester on Tuesday for the bye-week media availability. And first question from Chad Lesticow of the Des Moines Register is, if all 3 of your quarterbacks were healthy, so that's Cade McNamara, Brendan Sullivan, and Marco Lainez the third, if all 3 of them were healthy, who would be the starter? Now, I think we can reasonably assume that it's not going to be Marco because when they were all healthy, he was the number 3 quarterback on that depth chart. And he struggled against Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl last year. So probably not going to be Marco. And from the way Lester answered the question, it kind of seemed like he saw it as a 2-horse race as well between McNamara and Sullivan, but he didn't say either quarterback. He just said, oh, it would be an open competition. And so that left a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position for the Hawkeyes, with both McNamara and Sullivan nursing themselves back to health. It's kind of anyone's guess as to who it's going to be under center when Iowa travels to Maryland to take on the Terrapins. I think that answer leads me to believe that, reading the tea leaves, it's going to be McNamara when they had their last open competition, which Lester pointed out, the only time you have everyone healthy is fall camp, really. And that's really the only time you can have an open competition. The last time that happened, Cade McNamara won the quarterback battle, right? He was the starter until the Northwestern game, had that weird injury situation where he ended up missing the rest of the game. Sullivan had a really strong game. Then he led him to a massive win over Wisconsin. And then the floor fell out against UCLA. He struggled, got a sprained ankle, missed the end of that game, missed the final 2 drives. Jackson Stratton, the 4th-string walk-on, comes in and attempted to pilot the Hawkeyes to a comeback win and couldn't make it happen. But right now, from the sounds of it, to me, I'm feeling like things are trending back towards a McNamara return.
Yeah, when you get asked about the quarterback situation nowadays with NIL and just everything that goes into it, trying to manage for the future, that's a tough question to ask, or that's a tough question to answer truthfully. So we'll see if your feel on it, if your read of Cade McNamara starting will come true. On the defensive side of the ball, what are your read of things there?
Yeah, so that paper that I mentioned earlier that's located in central Iowa put out a story recently talking about how the Iowa as a whole has done less with more, and they spoke specifically about the defense at parts in this article. And I kind of took issue with the way that this article kind of attacked the defense, I guess, kind of hand waving away the loss of starters Logan Lee, Cooper DeJean, and Joe Evans. They're returning 8 starters. They should be right back where they were. And I think that's not necessarily doing justice to the fact that they lost 67 starts in the last 2 years between those 3 players, which is and they lost almost a quarter of their defensive starts from last year with those 3 leaving. So kind of, I think, dishonest to pretend like those 3 aren't key contributors to what made that defense so good last year. And I mean, DeJean was a unanimous consensus first team All-American from the AP as a cornerback. Like, he was a great return man too, but he got All-American honors as a cornerback. And they're still a top defensive unit nationally. I have a story out about this that deep dives into the numbers a little bit more, but yeah, the UCLA game was bad. They didn't play very good. And the Michigan State game wasn't fantastic. The offense didn't necessarily support them in that game either. But when you're looking at the UCLA game, they got gashed on the ground, yes, but they still held the Bruins to 20 points and got 2 turnovers for that the offense could work with. So I just don't think it's necessarily a fair characterization to say that Iowa did less with more when they lost players and are still a top ranked unit nationally. And that's kind of what Phil Parker said yesterday when we got him during the media availability was, everyone thinks that when you return people, it's just going to be automatic that we're great again, but you still have to go out every day and earn it. And it's not necessarily that I don't think that they're not practicing as hard or trying to earn it as hard or challenging themselves as much. I just think you can't understate what Cooper DeJean, Logan Lee, and Joe Evans meant to the defense last year in helping them become just the dominant team that they were last year.
Somewhere in the football 101 handbook, I guess there's a line probably saying not all starters are created equal. And the Iowa defense might be seeing a little bit of that now.
Yeah, I certainly think that's the case. And so when I saw that headline, I read the story and I was just like, yeah, I can see where they're coming from. And Parker did admit, they fell short of internal expectations, but I still feel like maybe, like I said, it was an unfair characterization. So you can read my full thoughts on the defense in a story that'll publish shortly.
And you can check that out on Ethan's Twitter handle, which I do not have memorized. So we'll let you plug that at some point in the pod.
I got to at Ethan Petrik on X first. Then I changed it for a previous job. And when I went back, a bot account stole it from me. So now I'm at Ethan_Petrik.
That is a heartbreaking tale of Twitter handle. That's heartbreaking. It's my favorite season of the year. Not Thanksgiving, not Christmas, but bowl speculation season. It's always so fun to think about what the options are, knowing very well that whatever you see on November 13th is definitely probably not going to be the bowl all these teams are announced to. Have you had a chance to look at that in terms of what postseason could look like for the Iowa Hawkeyes?
Yeah, I mean, the Big Ten makes it kind of easy because they just tell you who gets the bid depending on where they finish in the conference standings. It's going to change a little bit with the expanded playoff and how many teams end up in there. But if the season were to end today and we went off of last year's 14 playoff, Iowa at 5th in the conference would be in the Music City Bowl. And the SEC doesn't, and that's a Big Ten SEC matchup. The SEC does not just list it like by standings, they they reserve the right to manipulate it and who they send it to. But if we were going straight up, fifth in the SEC versus fifth in the Big Ten, fifth in the SEC right now is Alabama, and so it's like Alabama, Iowa in Nashville sounds like a sweet matchup to me. And so that's like if we can get that, that's ideal. Alabama's probably going to end up in the college football playoff with like 3 losses, but I, I I think that the potential for a really cool bowl game is out there. Now, if they lose a game, they might end up in the Pinstripe Bowl, which I know a lot of people hate because it's in New York. It's cold. I think that would also be really cool to play a game at Yankee Stadium. They didn't speak glowingly of the game at Wrigley Field last year, but I think that would also be a cool matchup.
Yeah, the last I checked the bowl situations for Iowa State. It was the Fiesta Bowl against against Ohio State. That was 2 weeks ago. I'm guessing that's been updated, and it's not even a use for me to try and predict where they're going to end up, because the Big 12 also does kind of manipulate things to get those matchups that they think are going to do really well.
We'll go ahead and get into our Sunday's headlines today right after this. Welcome back to CyHawk Talk. We've got our Sunday's headlines today. Maybe one of mine is a Monday's headline, but Ben, I'll go ahead and let you start it out because you have a game this week. Tell me your first headline.
Ethan, after Iowa State's game against Cincinnati, I think one of the headlines is going to be the Veidt stuff. Because, of course, Tyson Veidt, who we talked about earlier in the show, is coming back and making his return. He knows Iowa State. 8 years here, 2 years with Matt Campbell at Toledo. He knows Rocco Becht. I think he's going to have something cooked up for Rocco Becht and this Iowa State offense that has been a little bit turnover prone in terms of fumbles and in terms of interceptions lately. So I think Tyson Veidt is going to have something special cooked up for the Cyclones, which could very well lead to a loss. So I think that leads into the November storm brings snow. Iowa State's job is to keep it from snowballing. Long headline with a deep message there. I mean, I wrote in my 3 burning questions, when is a snowball, right? Is it a 2-loss streak, a 3-loss streak, a 4-loss streak? I think 3 losses is definitely starting that way. 4 consecutive losses would be a definite snowball. So if Iowa State does lose this game, it's going to be all hands on deck to try and get that snowball off its track. And my last headline, this is a tricky one, Ethan, because I can spin it 2 ways, because I don't know what the heck's going to happen on Saturday. I don't know if Iowa State's defense is going to be able to stop anybody and show up. And so that's why I put the headline playoffs. And you know what I'm referencing there, the Jim Morris soundbite where he talks about playoffs. Why are you asking me about the playoffs? After the 7-0 start, Iowa State fans were talking about the college football playoff. They were in those projections. If Iowa State loses on Saturday, I think that's out the window. I think Jim Morris soundbite will be very relevant there. Or if Iowa State wins, they're at 8-2, still very much in the Big 12 title mix. All they would need is 1 slip up from Colorado, and they're right back in. Playoffs. So there's 2 different ways you can spin that last headline.
Very clever to go with a dual meaning there with that headline, kind of padding the chance that prediction ends up being correct, given that you've fence road your way to giving it the meaning of whatever happens, that headline works.
The best bet is a safe bet.
Well, since we're making bets, I'll go ahead and start off with my headline. It's the return of the McNamara. There it is. Return of the McNamara. Come on. Return of the McNamara. Oh my God. It's the return of the McNamara, playing off of the Mark Morrison song there. I think on Monday, so this is the Monday headline I teased earlier, when we get the depth chart for Maryland, I think Cade McNamara going to be back at the top at number 1. Oh, he's going to be healthy. Brendan Sullivan's still going to be nursing a bit of an injury. I think it would go there if they were both healthy anyway. But that's me calling my shot right there.
I love it.
Number 2, we want Bama. just like I said earlier, if everything lines up and you go number 5 in the Big Ten versus number 5 in the SEC, right now it's Alabama. I think you want an SEC opponent, even though Tennessee put a licking on you last year in the Citrus Bowl. Hopefully you can get a cool matchup in the Music City Bowl. Hopefully it's not Vanderbilt, because then that's a home game for the Commodores. But I think that's kind of what you're playing for at this point, given the way that the standings are at right now. I haven't looked at every single Big Ten team schedule between the teams at 1 through 4, but Iowa's 2 games back from 4, so it's unlikely that they're going to get higher than 5th. So Music City Bowl is kind of your end goal at this point, and it's going to be against an SEC opponent. So why not make it the SEC opponent? Bama. We want Bama. And then we'll round it out with Brian Revenge Week begins. As some of you may have known, Brian Ferentz, former Iowa offensive coordinator, is now a senior offensive analyst for Maryland. So the reunion is this week. We finally get the matchup. Can Iowa beat its former maligned offensive coordinator and the son of its head coach? Or will the Terrapins use that insider knowledge to beat the Hawkeyes? Tune in on Saturday, I guess.
A lot of insider knowledge on both teams this week. A lot of interesting reunions, a lot of stuff to look forward to over the next couple weeks of Iowa State and Iowa football. Keep tuned to the Quad City Times for women's basketball, soccer news. It's a busy time, but we'll keep you covered. And we'll be back, of course, on Sunday for our Sunday Rewind. Be sure to join us then.